Pundits have long predicted the fall of the dollar as a world reserve currency, but the United States' strong economic position and military might served as a reassurance that the death of the dollar was little more than overblown hype. But that was then, and this is now. The BRICS nations have increasingly been calling for a pivot away from the US dollar. Gold was bought in record quantities by central banks in 2022, and for the first time, a natural gas trade has been settled in Chinese yuan. Hey everyone, and welcome back. This is the Part-Time Economist, and in today's video we are talking all about the calls for a movement away from the US dollar as a world reserve currency. So in this video, I'd like to briefly explain what a reserve currency is, some of the advantages that it gives us in the US, some of these calls and examples of countries pivoting away from the US dollar, and then put all of this in perspective. So first off, what even is a reserve currency? As you can see from this article on Investopedia, a reserve currency is a large amount of currency held by central banks and major financial institutions to use for international transactions. Now, on the surface, a reserve currency can have a lot of benefits. For example, two countries can simply use one common currency to trade. They don't have to trade into lots of different currencies and be subject to currency risk. If they're using the same common currency, it just makes things easier. And there are a lot of benefits for us in the US as well. And this would apply, of course, to any country that their currency is the reserve currency. But we know that whenever we print dollars, there is going to be an inherent demand for those dollars because other countries are going to use US dollars for settlement of their international trades. So let's suppose that Brazil and Argentina are trading in US dollars. They first have to go out and get US dollars, which means even apart from the traditional role of US dollars, right? If we have a foreign country that wants to buy US products, they have to pay us in dollars, so they need dollars. Even above that level of demand, there will always be some inherent level of demand for US dollars simply to facilitate those international trades, which is good for us because we know however many dollars we print, someone is going to want to buy them, which essentially allows us to just print into existence whatever we want. And that has been causing concern for a number of countries. And this has all really come to a boiling point in the wake of the US trying to clamp down on the massive inflation. This article here says the US's attempt to counter domestic inflation by coming out of the zero-rate era led to severe distortions in the global currency markets due to the dollar strengthening. Essentially, what happened is commodities like oil are priced in US dollars. So when the US restricts the money supply, when they start hiking these interest rates, the prices of these commodities in dollar terms may fall, but not necessarily in terms of the other currencies used due to their exchange rate depreciation. Effectively, what the US can do is distribute some of its price rise to other countries via exporting inflation. So this is very disadvantageous for those other countries, kind of a benefit for the US. And these other countries are saying, hey, we don't necessarily like this. You can see for the first time that China has settled its first LNG, which is liquid natural gas, trade in yuan. So that's an absolutely huge deal because for years and years, we've been hearing about countries wanting to move away from the dollar, the death of the dollar, all of these things. But to finally have international trades getting settled in currencies other than the US dollar is something that many people seem to be concerned about. They're saying, maybe this is a bigger deal than I've been thinking. And we also have articles that 2022 was the biggest time for central banks to purchase gold. Again, highlighting the fact that many countries are starting to see cracks in the dollar. They want to get away from dollars and go to a historic asset that has maintained its value. And if you're just reading all of these headlines, it may indeed sound very scary. However, This move away from the US dollar is hardly anything new. As you can see here on this chart from the IMF, the share of reserves that are US dollars has been consistently falling since 1999, and I would imagine probably even further back than that, but you can see that over time it has went from about 70% in early 2000 to about 59%. So the historic pivot of countries away from US dollars to other reserve assets isn't exactly something new. And if we look at this article here, we can see that as early as 2014, countries, the BRICS nations, which is going to be Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, essentially created an alternative to the World Bank and the IMF fund. So they're creating here the new development bank, which again is going to serve many of the same functions of the IMF, World Bank, but it's going to be controlled by these BRICS nations. And we see that up to 20 other nations want to join them. So we see this expansion of other countries kind of aligning their policy goals. And interestingly, I found this doesn't just apply to monetary policy. If we look at the countries that have decided not to sanction Russia as part of the Ukrainian conflict, we see that a lot of these BRICS nations make that list as well. So what I see here is I think you have countries that are being disadvantaged by the existing monetary system and also the political system. And they're saying if we band together, we can create something that is more equitable for us. And again, this is politics, so there's power relationships at play, but I think this article does a great job of highlighting how this could play out. Number one, I think that concerns of the dollar completely dying and imploding and just complete crash are completely overblown. The US is still obviously a very, very powerful economy, and we have to think, if there's a move away from the US dollar, where does all this money go? As the article points out, China has some of its issues as well. Every single country that could be the new reserve currency has some kind of issues, has something going on. So I think this article does a great job because it essentially highlights diversification, right? Not a single country having all the power, right? So if we look at the post-war period, the US was really the dominant power. It could kind of do what it wanted. It kind of had its way, so to speak. As we look at these other countries gaining more power individually or grouping themselves together to kind of have collective power, I think what you're going to see is a movement towards more of a multipolar world. Now, again, this doesn't mean that US influence is going to completely crash or decline, or that China is going to be a new superpower, or India, or Russia, or fill in any country. What it means is that countries are going to have more power and relative power balance compared to each other. So it's not just going to be one superpower. You're going to have a lot of countries that have varying degrees of power and influence, but they're at least going to have something. It's going to be more interplay instead of just one country doing absolutely whatever it wants. So as it comes back to the US dollar, the fall of the dollar, what does this all mean? How can I put it in perspective? Well, my personal opinion, and again, this isn't financial advice, I don't see the fall of the dollar. It's simply too big of a major economy. There's simply too much staked interest into the dollar and kind of the US-based international monetary system. I do think that as inflation continues, as other countries increase in economic power, you will see a continuing movement away from the US dollar. You will see some of these international trades being settled in other currencies. And I think you're going to see more of a balance of power between different centers, different collections of countries, and individual countries that are all kind of having more of a balance, both politically as well as economically. So again, those are just my thoughts, not financial advice, but when you see some of these headlines in the news, I think a lot of that gets shock value, right? Oh my goodness, the dollar's going to die. We finally have China ditching the dollar or whatever, right? And I think it's important to put these things in perspective. But as always, I'd be delighted to hear your opinions if you want to leave them in the comments down below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.